Hello and welcome everyone to the July 3rd edition of the SIG ContribEx biweekly meeting. We didn't meet last week, so this is the first one that we've had in about a month. Reminder that we do operate under a code of conduct, which essentially says to be respectful of your fellow speakers and attendees and generally be excellent to each other. We like to offer an opportunity at this point for anyone who's on the call to introduce themselves. Totally optional. I will start things off. I'm Chasm Fields, and I am a co-chair of this special interest group, which is the special interest group for contributor experience. We are focused on all sorts of aspects around the Kubernetes project that relate to the experience of being a contributor in it. So things like GitHub administration, mentoring, comms, moderation media. We'll talk about all of our various sub-projects, or as many of our various sub-projects as we have updates on today. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, all. I'm Chris Short. Work at AWS. I am a co-lead of the sub-project contributor comms here in the SIG ContribEx group. My pronouns are he, him.
Would anyone else like to go? Totally optional.
I can go next. My name is Sujay. I am from India. I work as a solution engineer at Equinox and looking forward to contribute and getting involved again. Yeah, that's me.
Welcome back. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mario. I am part of SIG's Infra, and I'm also a shadow for the SIG ContribEx comms sub-project, and I work for Kubernetes. Pronouns are he, him.
Welcome, welcome. Anyone else? And we have an intro in the chat as well. I can read it aloud if you like, but it's there. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? Cool. We will move right along then. Also, I didn't mention my pronouns once again. She, her. I put it in my my little bubble today, so at least I've got that. Let's dive into our agenda. In this meeting, we'll go over updates from our various sub-projects, starting with events. What updates do we have from Contributor Summit, Mario?
Yeah, we have finally all leads. So all leads are set, which is great. Thanks again to Xander for stepping up for the social event lead, because it was the last lead that was missing. We had various comms already sent out, already with a volunteer request, which brought up I think 12 at least interests for helping out, which is amazing. Registrations are trickling in, I believe, since the last ContribEx meeting. So registration is open, the CFP is open, the award email reminder emails to the TLs have been sent out. For the SIG leads have been sent out. So we are waiting for nominations from them, and there will go out some communication regarding the design for T-shirt and for the award next week, because this week is public holiday, so we agreed that we will have it next week. So overall, we have still some time left, and it's already looking pretty well from my point of view. Thanks for all of the folks that did an amazing job and made it really easy for me.
Always good.
And that's it. Anyone have any questions, remarks, comments?
I might as well ask, since Josh is also here, I'll take advantage. I had a question open in the Summit staff channel about I'm working on putting together the form for award designs, and those are usually 16 by 16 canvases. So I think any kind of image file that is in a resolution that will print cleanly on 16 by 16 inches would be fine. But we were debating if we should just require vector, because then it doesn't matter how we decide to print it.
I would just do that, to be honest.
Cool. That is most of what we do in general, so it's going to be a useful skill for folks.
I think so as well. So
Okay.
+1 for vectorizing, or vectorized logos only.
Cool. I think I will update the guidelines in that form then, and remove the line about the 16 by 16 resolution and just make it a vector. I also say in the form, by the way, that there is an open source tool called Inkscape that folks are welcome to use to create vector graphics. It's free and relatively approachable, if I may say so myself. Awesome. I also wanted to mention that I've been having a ton of fun setting up the comms team, and I have a PR open for updating the comms team handbook. So if anyone on the call is interested in reviewing that and hasn't yet, the link is in the Summit staff channel.
I need to do that still, sorry.
All good. I appreciate it. One thing that I'm updating there that I kind of wanted to call out actually verbally is that I'm updating it to say that volunteers are expected to be involved with a single cycle, but shadows I would expect to be involved with at least 3 cycles of the contributor summit, because a shadow should theoretically go through a shadow cycle, a lead cycle, and then leads then become emeritus, and as emeritus leads, they should mentor the lead after them. So for someone shadowing, I would expect them to be involved with the contributor summit for 3 cycles. So that is something that I'm pointing out in the handbook now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was part of our original plan for shadowing the handbook was to effectively have 2 separate parallel crews, one for North America and one for Europe. That hasn't worked out because we haven't been able to reach sufficient levels of staffing for that.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because it would be nice. It would be nice for the folks doing Europe to be able to actually have meetings that work better for them. But maybe next year.
That would be interesting for the outline too. The way that I have it written in the comms handbook right now is that a shadow is expected to be involved for 3 cycles, at least a year and a half, which equates to at least a year and a half. And so if we did it alternating, then that would be at least 3 years of commitment. I'm trying to call out these things more clearly.
And FYI for Paris, we had a European meeting. So for the folks that have or that are European based, and I think we had it once.
Oh.
And everything else was then done in the all over meeting that happened on. So for the European folks, it's Monday evening, and it's still Monday evening, and I think it works out because it's early for the US folks and it's late for the European folks. So everyone,
Time zones.
For everyone, it's Monday. So I think that's fine.
The hardest challenge in open source.
Right. Meetings.
Apologies that my camera is super tilted today. Trying to fix that. Anyway, any other questions, comments about Contributor Summit? Or shadowing or volunteering or any of those types of things? Wonderful. We will move on to mentoring then. Are there any updates on mentoring from this group? I know that we had someone in our last call, which was a month ago, who was interested in taking on mentoring work. And he was in our
Yeah, there hasn't
comms
been any
call last
follow-up
week.
on that.
Okay. If-
I gave him all the various mentoring projects and said, you know, hey, you could take on any one of these. Let me know when you want to get started, and I haven't heard anything since then.
Cool.
Which is often,
Reminder
you know,
might be a good idea. I think he does still want to do it.
Yeah.
So might
yeah. I
just
guess
take
the
a
other thing
couple of
is,
tries.
LFX term 2 just started. We've got a couple of Kubernetes projects in there.
Good to know. Exciting. Gonna put in a note there of shadow kind of fell off. Need to check back in if we call him a shadow interested person. Something like that. Any other questions about mentoring? All right, then we'll move on to contributor comms. Would anyone like to give an update from the contributor comms subproject?
I mean, if you want. So we are meeting this week, folks. If you're on the comms team and hearing this, Mario
Or
has
if you're not and you want to
graciously
join,
right,
do it.
yeah, all the above. Mario has taken on the hosting duties, and he will do fantastic, I am sure. We have multiple SIG spotlights in progress, and then since I lost the window, SIG API machinery chair got back to us and asked for a sample format of a sub-project blog.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. Federico put this in, I guess? Who put this in? I didn't put that in.
Yeah, I put it.
Cool.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I reached out to the chairs of the. I mean, I mentioned them after a while that they didn't react to the initial question, and yeah, basically they're interested to know like how different this one is from the previous one that they did with Federico, our lead of blogging. Yeah.
Exactly.
Federico and Federico. I know it took me
Yeah.
some time to figure it out.
Yeah. So you should sub-projects are one way that we could reframe this to make it a little bit different, but also if there are any particular projects that they want to focus on that were not the specific focus of that blog, this is an opportunity for them to have an additional blog written about them.
Yeah.
So
I basically told him that we have already covered 3 sub-projects in the SIG architecture and sent him the links to like get a feeling of how it would look like. And hopefully he will nominate some interviewee so that we can follow up on this.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving it a shot. We'll see what we find.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other
I don't
comms things?
I don't think so.
Any questions or comments for the comms team? Awesome. If we remember something at the end, we can always come back to it.
That might happen.
There's a lot of work going on. Each meeting is very full, but we're just chugging along over here.
It's all good.
And we'll move on to contributor documentation. Any updates there from anyone in this group today? That makes sense to me. Things that fall into contributor documentation are like the contributor guide and the contributor site, kates.dev. I don't think there's anything in particular going on with that right now. Just updates for the contributor summit and blogs, I suppose. So we will move on to moderation and media. Any updates on Zoom, Slack, or YouTube moderation, media, Zapier type stuff from this group?
Very minor update on Slack moderation. Actually, two different updates in Slack operation. One minor, one not so minor. The minor one is historically the Slack moderators took the approach of if somebody posted technical spam, to give them a warning and community standards, and not actually boot them off until they ignored that warning. Given the number of sort of drive-through spammers that we've had, we've stopped giving people warnings. The principle we're taking basically is if somebody joins the Slack and their very first message is a spam, they just get kicked off with no warning. Because like the past 5 or so people that we've given a warning to have simply ignored it and spammed someone else. So the bigger issue is we've been going over the need to migrate all of the test jobs, which people should be paying attention to. And one of those is the Tempelus job. Tempelus, I don't actually know how that's pronounced.
That's right.
Is a tool that we develop within Kubernetes in order to have GitOps over our channel and team list for Slack. And we realized when working on this that everybody who has previously worked on Tempelus, who has touched it in a code sense at all, is now no longer active in the project.
Oh no.
Which is not a great state to be in since Tempelus is ours and it's not maintained by anybody externally. So I'm going to work on a help wanted issue, because this would be really nice for somebody who is proficient in Go and wants to get involved in contributing to Kubernetes because it is relatively self-contained. So look for that in the future.
Good to know. Thank you for calling that out.
I have so many thoughts running through my head right now, but should we be looking for somebody that has Tempelus experience out there that might be?
There's probably not
somewhat
many of those, right?
or-
Nobody.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Nobody has experience. We created it. I mean, actually,
Right.
I mean, honestly, only 3 people have ever had their hands on it, so it's
Oh,
not
God.
surprising that we
Okay.
ended up in this situation.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Mentorship.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
Tempelus is one of those utilities that theoretically we should break out into its own repo so that we can advertise it to other projects
Yes.
and potentially get other people interested in it. But at this point, that would actually require somebody getting involved with the code to make it happen. So, including modernizing it, because right now it's dependent on legacy Slack tokens. So that falls under the, oh, gee, we should have done this a while ago. I did do a brief search. As far as I know, there's nothing comparable that's a general open source project that has other maintainers.
Good to know. That will be a challenging help wanted. Do we know what it's written in or where even the code and stuff is?
Oh, it's written in Go, and it's
Okay.
it's in the it's actually in the community repo.
Okay.
So
You described it as a job. Does that mean that it's actively running on a cluster somewhere?
The job specifically is the pre-submit job within the community repo, because if somebody submits something that changes, say, the list of channels, there needs to be a pre-submit job that checks that that's formatted correctly. Otherwise, we can break Slack.
Good to know. The community repo. It's essentially like a test, right? Basically.
And overall, Tempellis is how we control the list of channels and teams on Slack.
Okay.
It's how we manage everything but direct moderation.
Interesting. Today I learned.
Yes.
No immediate solutions for that, but good to know about. We'll keep an eye out for Go folks who want to get involved.
Yeah.
Any other moderation and media items? Zapier, YouTube, Zoom type stuff. Oh, actually, I have a Zoom update. We did actually get, oops, we did actually get additional licenses. I had mentioned a few meetings ago, there were some working groups that wanted their own Zoom accounts. And we didn't have enough licenses to give them those Zoom accounts. So I created a issue with the CNCF. That finally got fulfilled. We requested enough to have them for all of the working groups. And there's a couple of SIGs also that actually didn't have Zoom accounts right now. So we have enough now. I need to let folks know about that. And I had hoped to create a process that folks can go through, or like at least more clarity around the process that folks can go through to request that. I don't know if I'll actually get that done or just reach out to people, but that does exist now. I need to get that distributed appropriately. Any questions about that, or any other questions, comments about moderation and media? All right. I think we'll move on then to GitHub management. Anyone in this group have any updates on GitHub management? Nope. Next item, I do believe there are some updates here. Elections. Maybe not, actually. We'll see. Any elections updates? Probably a Josh Burkus question.
Yeah. We're a little behind schedule at this point, mostly because we've been having trouble filling the full slate of election officers. At this point, we have 3 officers, but we don't have any alternates. And that so we've still been. I posted notices in a couple of places. We've been reaching out to a number of individuals who are longtime community members, and were not expecting to be running for a steering seat themselves. Happy to take suggestions of additional people who might be interested in being an election officer alternate. Once we can actually get our full slate, then we can start the whole election process. But we're about 2 weeks behind where we'd like to be because of that.
Understandable. So if anyone knows anyone who is already deeply involved in the community and has at least a basic understanding of the election process, probably preferably someone who's voted in an election before.
Yeah. I mean,
who might
the
wanna be an
requirements
officer.
are you have to have been an org member for at least a year.
Okay.
You have to not be running for steering, and as a matter of fact, agreed to not politic at all for anybody who's running for steering, because you can't do that and be an election officer. So the and then beyond that, there's some work involved, which tends to be bursty, as in around the period when candidates need to file their statements, around making all the announcements, and then around the actual voting period itself.
When I have served as an election officer in the past, I have kind of managed comms for that. One of the folks in the comms team who helped me out with that actually asked if we were going to be doing election comms again this cycle. So there's interest in the comms team to support the election with comms.
Yeah, and the past couple of cycles, we've had somebody from comms who was also an election officer, but that's not a requirement. We put it in the rules of having potentially a comms liaison, as well as a Kate's infra liaison, which is also required because the voting software runs within the Kate's infra.
Cool. I think maybe someone that you have on the election officer list is already in comms. I can ask you later. I don't know if we want to talk about that on the call.
Oh, and for other people who are interested, is that the sort of next steps are, if we can locate one or two alternates, then we present the full slate of, then we send the full slate of election officers to the current steering committee to approve.
Yeah.
And then once they get approved, the election officers actually set the schedule for the election.
Sounds good to me. Any questions or comments about elections? And the election itself will actually take place in what, September, October, probably?
Yeah.
Right before KubeCon.
Yeah. The I mean, the thing is, we need to set the schedule. We need to announce everything. We need to have a period, probably longish because it's summertime, for candidates to post their profiles. I send out a whole bunch of reminders about people making sure that that they are still org members, and maybe applying for org membership if you're qualified and have not. And then there's the election period itself. So.
Cool. I think with that, we'll move on. And the last item on our schedule is open mic discussion. I put one item in there. I've been trying to keep this meeting updated about our annual report for SIG ContribEx. We do have an annual report for 2023 in finally, now that we are halfway through 2024. So I put the link there in the notes in case anyone is interested in taking a look at it. We had a lot of ideas about things that we wanted to do with it this time. We managed to incorporate, I think, a pretty good number of them. We have ideas for continuing to make the report better next year. So pretty proud of the work that got done with that this time. Looking forward to the next cycle of it. Maybe we'll even get it done before the following year is half over. Who knows? Anything else that folks would like to discuss in open mic or discussion for SIG ContribEx? Question in the chat. I will read it aloud. A question about the Contributor Summit. Doesn't every KubeCon have a Contributor Summit? I see KubeCon India coming up, but I haven't noticed any discussions about KCS happening there. I'm guessing it's only for NA and EU. I can speak to this, but I'm sure others would love to.
Right. Yeah, no, there honestly hasn't been discussion because KubeCon India has been a bit chaos. As far as I know, the CFP has not opened, and it's already weeks past when it was supposed to open. Oh, it opened. Okay.
It opened like yesterday.
Yeah. So basically, KubeCon India has been a bit not not the best organized from the LF event side compared to the well-established KubeCons. Obviously, a contributor summit at KubeCon India, like we've had in the past KubeCon China, would be heavily dependent on regional volunteers. And then beyond that, the scale of the contributor summit there would depend on what they expect turnout to be. Because most of the ones, like for China, for example, have not been the sort of multi-track thing that we have for North America and Europe, but rather a single track with a schedule of a few discussions and a bunch of SIG meetings. I'd expect the first India one to be the same. So if the CFP is out, might actually be time to call and see if we have people who want to organize one.
Do we know if Linux Foundation already have planned for it?
That's a good question, right? The question is the Linux Foundation going to provide space, right? And do they know if they can provide space even? Because one of the problems with this event has been the venue. So I don't know. Do we want to reach out to the Linux Foundation before we reach out to see if we have organizers? Might actually be a good idea, because if it's absolutely not, if the answer is absolutely not, we have no space, then there's not a point in trying to get one in gear.
I think it actually, I will argue the other way, that maybe we should ask for volunteers, because I think that if we don't, people will ask what happened to it. If we just get a no from the CNCF and then don't follow through with it. If we open up the call for volunteers, then we'll get at least hopefully the interested folks involved. Then we ask, and then if it's a no, then everyone who needs to know knows about it.
Okay. Okay, so we'll get that started.
I know we had also had a brief conversation about whether they would want to do like a maintainers summit rather than a Kubernetes contributor summit for India. It sounds like with the planning challenges of the India event, they probably wouldn't try to implement a full maintainers summit for projects beyond just Kubernetes for the first time in India.
That was actually part of their original plan for India, and it probably has been taken off the table for the reasons you mentioned. Although I don't know for sure. That's actually also been discussed for other KubeCons. I don't see that as eliminating the Kubernetes Contributor Summit.
Basically, Kubernetes Contributor Summit would be like part of it, right?
I don't know that I want that, because the Kubernetes Contributor Summit is about Kubernetes. And we have like a full day of stuff about Kubernetes. And mixing it up with 170 other CNCF projects is going to honestly prevent us from working on things that the project needs to work on. I mean, that's going to be a discussion with CNCF events. I mean, I could see some crossover, but my thought was that their maintainer summit is a way of giving a whole bunch of other projects a place to do some of what we do at the Kubernetes Contributor Summit.
But most other CNCF projects are much smaller and much less, have much less need for the kind of organization that we have to do in order to get our contributors together and to collaborate. So I do see that argument. I think there are also some interesting arguments in having more centralized planning for the summit. If there were a maintainer summit, I would imagine the CNCF would take on more of the responsibilities there, which could be nice. It also could be a bad thing.
I mean, they would have to, but like I said, I see this as separate from the Kubernetes Contributor Summit. And am actually willing to argue with the Linux Foundation about it because, basically topics at their maintainer summit would have to be very general, right? We have sessions at the Kubernetes Contributor Summit that are like, oh, hey, how are we going to upgrade this part of our infrastructure to this version of Go, right? Which is important for us to do, but is not something we could do at a general maintainer summit.
I mean,
Well-
this depends on how it will be organized. So, for example, if they will create tracks for the bigger projects that are only focused on the project, then and basically there is still like a maintainer summit for Kubernetes, but they will so from we still have the own we get a track like in the KubeCon itself where it's like a Kubernetes track, and then people can hand in stuff there. Then it would not rule out anything from each other, right? So we could still have like super specialized discussions in a general summit.
I could also see a structure like that working. I don't know if they would do it.
I mean, for example, if they say that they just use the whole venue for the maintainer summit, and it's happening like a day -1 event, like we have the contributor summit on Monday. It just depends on the size and how you build it up, right?
Yeah, well, and they would also need to schedule it to not conflict with a lot of the colos because many of the colos actually are. I mean, like, you don't want to have the maintainer summit on the same day as Cilium Day and Istio Day, right?
Yeah,
It would be even worse
because it
for
would be a
that.
direct conflict.
Yep.
Yeah, but I don't know what the plans are there, or importantly, who's organizing it from the CNCF side. Because this would, and then that would be the other problem, right? Is coordination, right? Because we have a team that runs our summit, but I would not volunteer to figure out, how we're going to include things for 100 other projects. But at the same time, I would also not want the event staff to take over our schedule.
These are
But I mean,
reasonable requirements.
that's just discussions where we first need to see in which direction the Linux Foundation wants to go.
Right, and it's possible that they're postponing this for an indefinite amount of time, right? Because they're completely aware that it's going to require a lot of staffing on their part, plus additional rooms, plus basically additional expenses that they can't solicit direct sponsorship for. So,
yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion for us to kind of keep alive as long as this idea is on someone's mind. I don't know if it will ever come to pass, but if we have thought through it and we're prepared for it, if they ever do try to go that direction, then that'll be good. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you for asking. We were in open mic discussion now that I think about it. So were there any other items that folks wanted to bring up or discuss while we are on the call and recording? Sounds like no. So thank you everyone for joining today. I think we have accomplished our purpose here. And I will go ahead and turn off the recording. We'll say goodbye to our friends on YouTube. Goodbye, YouTube.